biological psychology. It's also called physiological psychology. Actually, that's the name of it at Diné College. I've taught the same class. I've been teaching this class for about 30 years, um, mainly because I have a medical background. So I understand all of these things. A lot of psychologists try to stay away from science, from hard sciences. But I have degrees in medicine. So I have a degree in medicine. Don't let me stretch it too far. Um, so let's go ahead and get started. There we go. Biopsychology or biological psychology or physiological psychology. And Psych 255 is the physiological psychology course at Diné College. Okay. Psychological researchers study genetics in order to better understand the biological factors that contribute to certain behaviors. Of course, genetics isn't all that we study, but we're going to take a quick look at it. Take a quick look at what they actually do. While all humans share certain biological mechanisms, we are each unique. And while our bodies have many of the same parts, brains and hormones and cells with genetic codes, these are expressed in a wide variety of behaviors, thoughts, and reactions. Why do two people infected by the same disease have different outcomes, one surviving and one succumbing to the ailment? How are genetic diseases passed through family lines? Are there genetic components to psychological disorders such as depression or schizophrenia? To what extent might there be a psychological basis to health conditions such as childhood obesity? And this is all we're going to answer all of these questions in this chapter. My mother had brown eyes and my father had blue eyes. They're both gone now. Brown eyes are dominant while blue eyes are recessive. Anytime a brown eyed gene is present, the offspring will have brown eyes. Blue eyed people have two recessive blue eyed genes, otherwise, they would also have brown eyes. So here, my dad had blue eyes, my mother had brown eyes. My first sister was born with blue eyes. My first brother was born with brown eyes. My second sister had brown eyes. I was number four with blue eyes. My second brother has brown eyes, and my baby brother has blue eyes. And we're all related, of course. So three of us have blue eyes and three of us have brown eyes. Why did half my siblings have brown eyes and the other half have blue eyes? My father's sperm always carried the blue-eyed trait because he was homozygous, homo meaning the same, so all his genes were the same. They were blue. It was my mother who determined the eye color by the genes in her heterozygous ova, hetero meaning other or different. Half my mother's ova had dominant brown genes and the other half had recessive blue genes. In product, three blue-eyed offspring and three brown-eyed offspring. Let's talk about something more serious than eye color, like sickle cell anemia. When a man and a woman with sickle cell trait have children, they have a 25% chance of having a child with sickle cell anemia, the disease itself, a 25% chance of having a child without without a sickle cell trait, and 50% chance of having a child with the sickle cell trait. It is thought that sickle cell is a positive adaptation to areas where malaria is prevalent. People with sickle cell trait rarely get the severe form of malaria. 8 to 10% of African Americans have sickle cell trait, while 0.3% have sickle cell anemia. And this is how it works. And this is the same with brown-eyed and blue-eyed. Genetic variation, the genetic difference between the individuals, is what contributes to a species' adaptation to its environment. In humans, genetic variation begins with an egg, about 100 million sperm, and fertilization. Fertile women ovulate roughly once per month, releasing an egg from follicles in the ovary. During the egg's journey from the ovary through the fallopian tubes to the uterus, a sperm may fertilize the egg. The egg and the sperm each contain 23 chromosomes. Chromosomes are long strings of genetic material known as deoxyribonucleic acid, or DNA. DNA is a helix-shaped molecule made up of nucleotide base pairs. In each chromosome, sequences of DNA make up genes that control or partially control a number of visible characteristics known as traits, such as eye color, hair color, and so on. A single gene may have multiple possible variations or alleles. An allele is a specific version of a gene. So a given gene may code for a trait of hair color, and different alleles of that gene affect which hair color an individual has. When a sperm and egg fuse, their 23 chromosomes combine to create a zygote with 46 chromosomes, or 23 pairs. Therefore, each parent contributes half the genetic information carried by the offspring. The resulting physical characteristics of the offspring, called the phenotype, are determined by the interaction of the genetic material supplied by the parents. The phenotype refers to the individual's genetic material that is expressed or that is shown, like whether you have brown eyes, whether you have curly hair, whether you have long fingers, whether you have short, stubby arms, and all of this can be influenced by the environment. Genotype is a genetic material whether expressed or not. Gene mutations provide one source of harmful genes. A mutation is a sudden permanent change in a gene. While many mutations can be harmful or lethal, once in a while a mutation benefits an individual by giving that person an advantage over those who do not have the mutation. The theory of evolution asserts that individuals best adapted to their particular environments are more likely to reproduce and pass on their genes to future generations. Okay. Each of us represents a unique interaction between our genetic makeup and our environment. This is known as range of reaction, and is one way to describe this interaction. Range of reaction asserts that our genes set the boundaries within which we can operate, and our environment interacts with the genes to determine where in that range we will fall. Another perspective on the interaction between genes and the environment is the concept of genetic environmental correlation. Our genes influence our environment, and our environment influences the expression of our genes. Not only do our genes and environment interact as in range of reaction, but they also influence one another bidirectionally. The child of an NBA basketball player would probably be exposed to basketball from an early age, and this is Steph Curry and his dad. Both of them are professional. He was a professional basketball player, and he is one of the best basketball players in the world, even though he's not very tall. Such exposure might allow the child to realize his or her genetic athletic potential. Thus, the parent's genes, which the child shares, influence the child's environment, and that environment in turn is well suited to support the child's genetic potential. And these are baseball players. This is Barry Bonds, and that's his dad, Bobby Bonds. This is Vlad Guerrero, and that's his dad. He's Vladimir Jr., he's Vladimir Sr., and this is Seattle Mariners, Cincinnati Reds. I'm trying to think. They both played on the Cincinnati Reds at the same time. Oh, come on. He's they called him Junior, of course. I can't think of his name. Anyway, there you go. Bobby and Barry, Vlad and Vlad, Steph, and I don't remember his dad's name. And by golly, that name will come to me in just a second. In another approach to gene-environment interactions, the field of epigenetics looks beyond the genotype itself and studies how the same genotype can be expressed in different ways. Researchers study how the same genotype can lead to very different phenotypes. Genes affect more than our physical characteristics. Scientists have found genetic linkages to a number of behavioral characteristics, ranging from basic personality traits to sexual orientation to spirituality. Genes are also associated with temperament and a number of psychological disorders such as depression and schizophrenia. While it is true that genes provide the biological blueprints for our cells, tissues, organs, and body, they also have a significant impact on our experiences and our behaviors. In a 2004 study by Finnish psychologist Pekka Tierneri and colleagues, people who were given up for adoption, adoptees whose biological mothers had schizophrenia, and who had been raised in a disturbed family environment were much more likely to develop schizophrenia or another psychotic disorder than were any of the other groups in the study. Of adoptees, those biological mothers had schizophrenia, high genetic risk, and who were raised in disturbed family environments, 36.8% were likely to develop schizophrenia. Of adoptees whose biological mothers had schizophrenia, high genetic risk, and who were raised in healthy family environments, only 5.8% were likely to develop schizophrenia. Of adoptees with a low genetic risk, whose mothers did not have schizophrenia and who were raised in disturbed family environments, 5.3% were likely to develop schizophrenia. Of adoptees with a low genetic risk whose mothers did not have schizophrenia and were raised in a healthy family environment, 4.8% were likely to develop schizophrenia. So what do we have here? We have in a disturbed environment and the mother had schizophrenia, about a third of the individuals developed schizophrenia. If the mother had schizophrenia and they were raised in a healthy environment, 5.8%. That's about 1/6 of as likely. If the mother didn't have schizophrenia, but they were raised in a disturbed environment, 5.3%, about the same as just before. And of the adoptees who were raised in a normal family environment and mothers didn't have schizophrenia, 4.8% were likely to develop schizophrenia. Biological psychologists seek biological evidence for psychological phenomena. They study how mental processes and behavior are linked to biological structures and processes. They concentrate on such structures as neurons, the nervous system in general, the cerebral cortex, the endocrine system, and heredity. The main structure of the nervous system is the nerve cell, or the neuron. All our functions, sensations, and perceptions are controlled by neurons. We are born with about 100 billion neurons, mostly in our brains. Neurons communicate through an electrochemical process triggered by a chemical known as a neurotransmitter. The neurotransmitter passes from one neuron to the other through a narrow gap called a synapse. And this is the chemical reaction. The nerve itself is an electrical reaction, and then it forces the release of the neurotransmitter, and then the neurotransmitter goes through the gap, and then it attaches itself to a receptor on the next, whatever it's attaching itself to, usually another neuron, and then the electrical charge starts again. The brain and the body are do not only contain neurons, but a large number of glial cells as well. Glial cells are the housekeeping cells of the neurons, nourishing them, protecting them, and directing their growth. The neuron receives information from tentacle-like structures known as dendrites, and these are the dendrites right here. As a living cell, the neuron must maintain a nucleus which is located in its cell body and which is called the soma. This is the soma right here. The neuron transmits its message through its main stalk, a structure called an axon. So we have the dendrites, we have the soma with the nucleus, and there we have the axon. At the end of the axon is a bulbous structure known as a terminal. Messages that are collected by the dendrites pass through the soma and into the axon for transmission to the next neuron or muscle. At the end of the terminal is the synaptic cleft, and we saw that here. This is the synaptic cleft. This is the axon. This is the bulbous area known as a terminal. And it's connected to a dendrite on the other side, or a receptor of some kind. Some axons are wrapped in a fatty sheath known as a myelin. The myelin is actually constructed of specialized glial cells called Schwann cells. The myelin is segmented into sausage-like structures with the opening between the segments called nodes of Ranvier. Myelin insulates the axon from the electrical charge atmosphere around the neuron. Myelin accelerates the response 110 times and looks white as compared to gray matter. So if we look at the brain, we can see that we have gray matter on the outside and we have white matter on the inside. We look at our spinal columns, we can see that we have white matter on the outside and gray matter on the inside. So the outside of the spinal column is myelinated neurons, and the inner portion is not myelinated. However, the brain is the opposite. The brain has non-myelinated neurons on the outside, and it has myelinated neurons on the inside. A disease of the myelin is multiple sclerosis. In this disease, the fatty myelin is replaced with fibrous tissue that interrupts impulses and makes it difficult to function. Eventually, MS sufferers lose their mobility due to non-functional motor nerves in the legs and the back. The sufferer will be able to maintain functioning until the nerve damage becomes severe enough to destroy the nerve. When a stimulus comes into the body, it travels to the central nervous system, the brain and spinal cord through afferent neurons. Afferent neurons. So it comes into the spinal column, the central nervous system, spinal column, or the brain. It comes in through afferent neurons. Afferent neurons. When the nervous system sends out a response, it travels through efferent neurons. Afferent nerves carry sensory information from sense organs toward the central nervous system. Efferent neurons carry information away from the central nervous system to muscles and glands. Neural impulses are electrochemical impulses. At rest, the electrical charge inside a neuron is at minus 70 millivolts. The charge is negative because of the increased amount of negative chloride ions. Also inside the neuron are positively charged potassium ions. Outside the cell are positively charged sodium ions. Now you may notice that we have chloride and we have sodium. Sodium chloride, sodium chloride. We also have potassium, potassium chloride, potassium chloride. Both of those are salts, of course, sodium chloride. When a chemical neurotransmitter signals a need for a response, it changes the permeability of the membrane of the cell. Sodium gates and potassium gates open, and some potassium rushes out and lots of sodium rushes out. This area becomes depolarized and starts a chain reaction up the neuron. So much sodium rushes in that the minus 70 millivolts converts to positive 40 millivolts. The change of 110 millivolts is the neuron's action potential. As soon as it fires, the neuron starts recovering by dumping sodium and picking up potassium. Neurons only fire completely in what is known as the all or none principle. When an axon communicates at a synapse with its partner, it sends a flood of neurotransmitter across the synaptic cleft to excite the next neuron. More neurotransmitter than is necessary is sent across the cleft. To stop a response process, the neuron reabsorbs the neurotransmitter in the cleft and select reuptake sites. Okay, so what are we talking about today, and why is this important? Why do we care about neurotransmitters? Because this is one of the ways that we treat people. Let's take the example of somebody who's depressed. If somebody's depressed, what we will do is give them a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So we're blocking the reuptake of serotonin. Serotonin, it turns out, makes you feel good, makes you happy. So if we're treating you with a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor like Prozac or Zoloft or Paxil, then what will happen is because it blocks the reuptake of the serotonin, it allows there to be more serotonin in the synaptic cleft, making you feel better, making you happier. Does this happen right away? Can I throw a Prozac at you and you go, oh, I'm really jolly. This is really good stuff. If I'm unhappy, I'll just pop myself a couple of Zolofts and I'll be good to go. The answer is no. It takes time for you to build up selective SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors in your system, so that you feel better. It takes sometimes, well, it all depends on what's going on. It takes has a lot to do with your biochemical structure, but it should take between 2 to 6 weeks to get a therapeutic level into your system. Acetylcholine causes muscle contractions. This is it's an excitatory neurotransmitter. It is involved with the hippocampus to create long-term memory. The death of acetylcholine produces cells in the brain. The death of acetylcholine producing cells in the brain adds to the rapid memory loss in Alzheimer's disease. And that's why we develop Alzheimer's disease and lose our memories. Norepinephrine or noradrenaline accelerates the heart rate along with other processes. It leads to general arousal. It helps learning and memory. It makes you want to eat. Norepinephrine causes the manic and manic depression. Cocaine and amphetamines cause the release and block the reuptake of norepinephrine, and that's why the cocaine and amphetamines, methamphetamines, that's why it makes you feel so excited, because you have more norepinephrine in your system than you did before. And because because the chemical reacts so rapidly, it doesn't take 2 to 6 weeks to get a level in your system. All you have to do is snort cocaine, and within minutes, the norepinephrine level in your brain has increased. Dopamine is involved in fine muscle movement, learning and memory, emotional arousal. Schizophrenia seems to have something to do with too many dopamine receptor sites in the brain. This causes delusions and hallucinations. A deficiency of dopamine causes Parkinson's disease, palsy, tremors, and jerky muscle movements. So too much dopamine causes schizophrenia. Too little dopamine causes Parkinson's disease. Serotonin is involved in emotional arousal and sleep. Deficiencies of serotonin are implicated in depression, overeating, aggression, alcoholism, and insomnia. It is serotonin that acts as the inhibitory neurotransmitter to control the aggression caused by testosterone in the hypothalamus. The mood-enhancing Prozac, Zoloft, and Paxil are all known as selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs. LSD works because it inhibits serotonin and thus causes excitation. So there you go. Serotonin also has something to do with your sex drive, and I think I'm going to talk about that later. But just in case I don't, serotonin is it controls the testosterone in your hypothalamus. Testosterone in your hypothalamus creates your sex drive. So if you have a normal amount of testosterone, your sex drive is normal. If you have too much testosterone, then we need to increase what your body will probably do is increase its serotonin level to give you a normal sex drive. I hope all this is making sense. So one of the things that happens as you age, your testosterone level goes down. However, if you are depressed and we give you serotonin reuptake, selected serotonin reuptake inhibitors, it will increase your amount of serotonin, and it could potentially destroy your sex drive, no matter how old you are. Okay, so serotonin has something to do with your controlling your sex drive, actually. Endorphins inhibit pain. It takes up the receptor sites for the neurotransmitters that cause the pain response, prostaglandin, substance P, and bradykinin. Endorphins are the cause of runner's high. Endorphins can also give us a sense of competence. The peripheral nervous system is comprised of all the neurons not accounted for by the central nervous system. They all are connected to the central nervous system. One part of the peripheral nervous system is the somatic nervous system. It connects the skeletal muscles, the sensory receptors, and the surface of the body with the central nervous system. Sorry, I keep having to take a drink. I exercise just before I'm doing this, so I'm a little bit dehydrated. So every once in a while, I need to take a slurp of what I'm drinking. What I'm drinking is zero sugar Mountain Dew Code Red. So there you go. Cherry flavored. Not very cherry flavored, but enough, I guess. The autonomic or automatic nervous system is also part of the peripheral nervous system. It regulates things that have to take place without our thinking about it, like heartbeat, digestion, respiration, and dilation of our pupils. Two branches of the autonomic nervous system are the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. The sympathetic nervous system responds to stress, causing the body to ready itself for fighting, or fleeing. It increases heart rate, it causes a surge of sugar in your body, it shuts down digestion, it stops your kidney function. The parasympathetic nervous system restores normal functioning after the sympathetic nervous system has caused body changes. The spinal cord acts as an information conduit to the brain. However, some stimuli only go to the spinal column before they are responded to. These are called spinal reflexes, such as the knee-jerk response, bladder and defecating responses, as well as the sexual response. You don't have to think about it. It doesn't take time. It's almost automatic. In this case, the stimulus runs the afferent neurons to a neuron called the interneuron, and then back through the efferent neuron. If you look at a cross-section of the spinal cord, you will see that it is mostly an outer layer of white matter surrounding a core of gray matter. The gray matter is slower, non-myelinated cells, and the white matter is myelinated cells. The brain has an outer layer of gray matter and an inner layer of white. We talked about this earlier. And you can see the gray matter here on the outside. We can see the white matter on the inside. The human brain is much larger than any other animal save the African elephant-nosed fish. Because males are larger than most females, their brains are about 15% larger than most females. Even accounting for the size difference, the male brain is still about 5% larger. But brain size has little to do with intelligence, and there are several cerebral aspects that favor women. Female brains seem to utilize more glucose than male brains. Female brains have a larger corpus callosum, the connection between the two hemispheres. In the 1850s, renowned French surgeon Paul Broca decided that some people were naturally smarter than other people because of their race. He figured that the individual with the largest brain would be the smartest person. So what he decided to do, and one of the reasons he did this was because he thought that Frenchmen were smarter than Germans. So he wanted to prove that the French were the smartest people, the most evolved people on Earth. So he started measuring people's brains. He discovered that looking at hundreds of skulls from the ancients and modern races, that the people that he referred to as Eskimos, Inuits, Aleuts, the people that lived in the Arctic region of the world, had the largest brains. So that means that those people, the people that lived way, way up north, where it's so very cold, they were the smartest people on Earth because their brains were the biggest. He next looked at forearm to upper arm ratios. The apes have long forearms and short upper arms, and discovered that once again it was the Eskimos had they had the smallest ratio of all the races that he surveyed. So I don't know. I guess all those guys up there are Einsteins because their brains are bigger, their heads are bigger certainly, and they have the best ratio of upper to lower arms because they live so far north. So what's going on? So what is going on? Actually, what's going on is that people that live the warmer area that you live, the smaller your head. The colder it is, the larger your head. Why? Because your head loses a lot of heat. So if you live in a cold environment, your head is going to be larger to keep in more heat. It's the same way with your arms. If you live in a warm environment, you can have long, skinny arms. But if you live in a cold environment, your arms are going to be shorter. And that's the reason that the people that live in the Arctic region seem to be smarter as far as Paul Broca was concerned. They were the smartest people on Earth because of their brain size and their upper to the forearm and upper arm ratios, which wasn't true. It isn't really true. Brain size doesn't really have anything to do with intelligence. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Broca began a scientific endeavor where they weighed men of letters' brains after they died to see how much difference there was between individuals. Everyone was donating their brains to the endeavor. They, of course, discovered that some brilliant men had fairly light brains. Intelligence has nothing to do with size, but the number of synapses developed, something represented by fissures and convolutions. So the more it looks like the more it looks like cauliflower, the smarter you are. The smoother it is, the less intelligent you are. Didn't really have to do with mass. It had to do with the intricate structures inside. Modern humans have brains that average about 1,500 grams. Ivan Turgenev had a brain of more than 2,000 grams. This is Turgenev. He was a Russian author. Anatole France had a brain of less than 1,000 grams. This is Anatole France. He is actually French, strangely enough. The average Neanderthal brain weighed about 1,750 grams. So the smartest humans that have ever existed, or the ones with the largest brains, weren't modern humans. They were the Neanderthals. They had a much larger brain by about 250 grams. Some parts of the brain are prominent in lower animals, and these parts are the ones that scientists refer to as the primitive brain. This is known as the hindbrain and consists of the medulla, the pons, and the cerebellum. And this is the portion right here. Right there, the purple portion. Coming off the spinal cord, there is a flaring of the cord mass that is the first part of the brain. This is known as the medulla. We used to call it the medulla oblongata because it was oblong. It regulates the heartbeat, the blood pressure, and respiration. It also is crucial in sleeping, sneezing, and coughing. Okay, so if you damage this portion of your brain, you cannot cough. And you'll go into a coma, and you won't be able to sneeze. And this is one of the problems with people when they have motorcycle accidents. If they fall off a motorcycle, they're going 50 miles an hour, they go off the back of a motorcycle. Their skull, of course, tilts back, and their skull will cut into this, or bruise it. And if that happens, they'll go into a coma. And potentially they won't be able to breathe. You'll have to put them on life support. And if they actually sever this, then that's all she wrote, pretty much. But if they don't sever it, if they just bruise it, then potentially they can come out of a coma. The pons is a rounded bulge in the front of the medulla. The pons acts as a bridge between the spinal cord and the brain. It relays information about body movement and relates to attention, sleep, and alertness. The cerebellum is a small hemisphere that lies behind the pons and the medulla. The cerebellum controls balance and muscle coordination. Injury to the cerebellum will cause loss of coordination and a problem maintaining muscle tone. It is the cerebellum that is anesthetized when someone is so drunk that they are having trouble walking. And strangely enough, when you drink alcohol, it starts in the beginning, right here in the front of the brain, and you anesthetize all the way back to the cerebellum. This is the thinking portion of your brain. This is the part that allows you to make brilliant decisions. So if you're drinking alcohol, the first thing that goes is your ability to stop drinking alcohol. So as the brain slowly gets anesthetized, the first thing that goes is the ability to make executive decisions. This portion of your brain has to do with movement. So you'll start moving a little bit strangely. This portion of your brain right here has to do with your speech pattern. This has to do with eyesight. And of course, your cerebellum, this is when you pass out, when this portion of your brain becomes anesthetized. So what you're doing is it's slowly anesthetizing your brain. You can tell how drunk somebody is by whether they can move, whether they're able to keep their eyes open. When they start slurring their speech, you know it's getting to the back of their brain. When they're having trouble keeping their eyes open, you know it's to the very back of the brain, and then if they pass out, it's right here in their cerebellum. That's the way she works. The reticular activating system is a structure that runs from the hindbrain into the rest of the parts of the brain. The RAS acts as an alarm clock of sorts. When something happens while you are asleep that you need to wake up for, the RAS, the reticular activating system, can arouse you out of a deep sleep. Damage to or pressure on the RAS will put an individual into a coma. Alcohol can affect the RAS and put someone to sleep if they drink too much. Okay, I used to work in the laboratory, and one of my jobs was collecting drug urines. It was a great job, so they would. This is when I was in the service. Sometimes they'd bring an airman in who they knew was drunk. But they needed to find out how drunk the guy was. So one of the things that they would do is I would have to collect a drug urine, and then of course that would become part of his part of what we gave to the officer to make a decision as to what was going to happen to him next. It's really kind of interesting because he had to urinate, and we had to urinate in a container, of course. But one of the things that would happen is sometimes they couldn't do it. Sometimes they couldn't urinate. And it was really kind of interesting because alcohol, when it sits in your stomach, it gets into your blood, and it just keeps getting into your blood. So if your stomach is full of alcohol, you've had 5 or 6 beers, then slowly you're going to just be getting drunker and drunker and drunker. And so sometimes they'd bring these guys in, and of course they weren't making really good decisions, and then all of a sudden they were having trouble talking, they were having trouble moving, and sometimes, and you got to be really careful. So you're trying to make them urinate. So one of the things that we did was give them a glass of water so that it would run through their system, and they would be able to urinate. But that didn't always work, because if you put too much water in their stomachs, then it forced whatever was in your stomach into the stomach lining, and if that was alcohol, then they would get drunker. So it happened more than once that they had given him, the guy came in and he couldn't urinate, so they gave him a glass of water, and by golly, he would get so drunk that he'd pass out. So you had to be really careful as all of this stuff. Of course, back then, this was 50 years ago. So the knowledge of the process of getting drunk wasn't as sure as it is today, because we weren't able to look at the brain while people were drinking. Now we have a lot more knowledge, and we certainly wouldn't give them water anymore, because water makes you drunker, as strange as that may seem. Did I already do this? Yeah. The forebrain is the thalamus, the hypothalamus, the limbic system, and the cerebrum. This is the forebrain. The thalamus is located in the middle of the brain. This is the thalamus right here. The thalamus relays sensory information to the sensory areas of the brain. It also helps control sleep and attention to muscle coordination. So if you've been drinking and you want to get drunker, it takes about 30 minutes for alcohol to get into your system. So if you drank a couple shots of whiskey and you're sitting there, nothing's happening, you're going, oh, that must be the weakest stuff in the whole wide world. Just take a drink of water, and it will force the alcohol into your system faster. And of course, that's what people used to do. They used to drink a shot with a chaser. The chaser was usually 12 ounces of beer or whatever, and the shot was it was a shot. So you take tequila shots, and you're okay, you're okay, you're okay. You can just keep pounding them down, and then all of a sudden it just hits you. So it takes about 30 minutes for the alcohol to get into your system. So the reality is that after you've finished drinking and you had your 12 cans of beer, it takes about 30 minutes after you're done is when you're the drunkest. And of course, it's usually this part of the brain that's anesthetized. Just, you don't even realize you're drunk yet. Until 30 minutes after you're finished. Hypothalamus lies under the thalamus and above the pituitary gland. The hypothalamus regulates body temperature, concentration of fluids, storage of nutrients, and deals in motivation and emotion. It is involved in hunger, thirst, sexual behavior, caring for offspring, aggression, and the pleasure center. So the hypothalamus is extremely important. It actually controls the pituitary gland. This is where your sex drive comes from. This is where you are told that you're hungry. This is where you're told that you're thirsty. This is where your love for your children come from. And I read everybody's introduction, or the ones that put that in there. And everybody talked about how wonderful their children were, which I don't have any doubts. But it's right there in the middle of your brain. That's where that comes from. And it's a neurotransmitter called oxytocin that gives you these feelings, strong feelings of wanting to take care of your children. It's another neurotransmitter in your brain. Oxytocin, along with dopamine and serotonin. I mean, there are a number of things, but it's the oxytocin that focuses you on your offspring. So potentially there are people that don't have the mothering instinct or the parenting instinct. Maybe it's males, maybe it's a female that doesn't have these instincts. Is it natural to have these feelings? And the answer is, well, it's oxytocin. that causes this. So if you've got an individual that doesn't seem to care about their children, and it can be either males or females, it may be a lack of oxytocin in the brain. So it might be genetic. Now, I think I told you that I have 3 wives. I've had 3 wives. I've been married 3 times. My first wife left, and she left me with the kids. Now you would wonder, and I did. I wondered. Why would somebody do that? Why would they leave their children? Why is running off with some guy so much more important than taking care of your own offspring? And the answer was her oxytocin just wasn't very high. Now, oddly enough, and I should have recognized this, I'm not real bright, so I didn't recognize this. If you looked at her family, if you went back into her family history, you saw this happening with the females over and over and over and over again. She had 3 sisters, and of those 3 sisters, 2 of the other sisters abandoned their children. She had an aunt, and her aunt had 4 children and ran off with the painter. Um, her, her, her grandmother used to brag about the fact that she got pregnant by one guy, and she talked this other guy into marrying her, despite the fact that it wasn't his kid, and he didn't even know it. He hadn't even he wasn't smart enough to figure it out. And they used to laugh at this guy all the time. So what's my point? My point is that it isn't just men that abandon their children. Sometimes it's women, and it has to do with oxytocin, and it may run in families. I made a stupid mistake. I married the wrong person. I married into a family where the women had a low oxytocin level or whatever. They'll make the babies, but they won't take care of the babies. And as a matter of fact, I took care of both of my kids, even when they were little tiny guys. I don't know. Maybe I have too much oxytocin. She had too little or something. But then again, you might have a family where, you've got the guy doesn't have his oxytocin level is low, and so is his wife, and they just both take off and leave the kids. So there you go. Interesting, huh? The limbic system is a group of structures that are involved in memory, motivation, and emotion. The amygdala is an almond-shaped structure that controls aggression, and this is the amygdala. As you can see, it looks like an almond. From research, we know that one part makes us aggressive and one part makes us docile, potentially having something to do with fight or flight response. Hippocampus is involved in memory formation and retrieval, and this is the hippocampus right here. There you go. As you get older, the hippocampus gets smaller. The cerebrum, the part that's green, flashing green, is that part of the brain that represents our intellectual powers. The outer portion is known as the cerebral cortex. Cortex in this case meaning bark or outside. It is primarily gray matter. The wrinkles are known as convolutions, and the valleys are known as fissures. The more convolutions and fissures, the more intelligent that an individual is, because they have more surface area. And there you go. There's a smart guy or a young lady. The cerebrum has 2 halves, the right and the left half. The 2 halves are connected by the corpus callosum. The cortex is only about 1/8 of an inch thick. There are 4 lobes of the brain: the frontal in front, where most of our intellectual thought takes place. This is the frontal lobe right here. The parietal lobe is behind the frontal lobe and controls touch and movement sensations to most of the body. And and we are anesthetizing, as we're drinking our alcohol, we're anesthetizing our intelligence, then we're anesthetizing our parietal lobe, so we're losing our control of our touch and movement sensations. The occipital lobe is the back of the head and is our visual center. The temporal lobe is the area that controls our hearing. And I don't know if you've ever been at a bar where everybody was drinking, but everybody's going, huh? Huh? It's not that funny. The sensory motor cortex is in the parietal lobe, just behind the central fissure. It is where warm, cold touch, pain, and movement are, for most of the body, is detected. The motor cortex lies in front of the central fissure in the frontal lobe. It controls motor responses. And so there you go. These are the portions we're talking about right here. Learning language and speech are very complex responses that require stimulation in many areas of the brain. Women tend to have better language skills than men, and some evolutionary psychologists feel that it is because women have a larger corpus callosum that allows more communication between the hemispheres. And the reality is that women do have a larger corpus callosum, about 11% larger actually. So now this really helps, especially if somebody has a stroke, because you need connection, you need transfer of information between the two hemispheres of the brain, and that's the way it works. Damage to certain portions of the brain can cause curious language difficulties. Wernicke's area is in the temporal lobe. There's Wernicke's area right there. It responds to auditory information. When you read something, it will travel from the occipital lobe, be recorded as auditory information, and then be transferred back to Wernicke's area for interpretation. That is why when you read, you sometimes feel as if you can hear what you are reading. And that's because of Wernicke's area. A blow to the head is bad. Damage to Wernicke's area causes a condition known as Wernicke's aphasia, where the individual has a difficult time understanding spoken language. Sometimes after a concussion to the side of the head, it will take a person several minutes before they can understand what is being said to them. And that's one of the reasons why we have concussion protocols. You get hit in the head and a coach will come over and he'll ask you, how many fingers am I holding up? First of all, he's holding up a select number of fingers. He wants to know if you can hear him and understand what he's saying when he holds up the two fingers. He wants you to say, you're holding up two. So he not only wants you to be able to see his two fingers, but he wants you to be able to understand what he is saying. How many fingers am I holding up? And your answer should be two, and it should be understandable. If you have a blow to the side of the head and you can't speak, you can't quite speak because that portion of your brain is damaged, then you won't be able to say two. You'll say two. You won't be able to quite get it out. It'll sound like you're drunk. And if you sound like you're drunk, of course, concussion protocols kick in and they have to not let you go back into the game or whatever. Broca's area, you remember Broca? He was the one that measured everybody's brains. Broca's area is located in the frontal lobe on the side side of the left hemisphere. It's on the left side, right over here. It controls those muscles that are used during speaking. Damage to the area causes a condition known as Broca's aphasia, which is characterized by slow, laborious speech. We want you to say, I am holding up, how many fingers am I holding up? We want you to be able to see two, because I'm holding up two fingers. We also want you to say two. That's because if there's damage to the Broca's area, then you won't be able to say two distinctly. A concussion to that part of the brain will cause slurred speech, and that's really what we're looking for. Is your eyesight okay? This is your occipital lobe. Was there damage to your occipital lobe? Can you hear us okay? This is Wernicke's area right here. And can you say the number two, or the number three, or the number four? Or we'll ask you who's the President of the United States. And the reason we're asking you that question is, you have to think, what day is it today? It's Tuesday. Is today? Oh, today's Wednesday. Of course, not everybody knows what day it is. Obviously, since I didn't know it was Wednesday. Angular gyrus lies between the visual cortex and Wernicke's area. It interprets visual cues and translates them into auditory information. Dyslexia is caused by a malfunction in the angular gyrus, making it difficult for individuals to break written words into sounds. And I have a brother and a sister that have dyslexia. My dad had dyslexia. And whereas there were 6 of us in the family, and 4 of us were able to learn to read just by looking at the words, and 2 of us had to use phonics in order to be able to read. And to this day, my sister has an IQ that's not, well, it's 135 is what she claims her IQ is, but she doesn't read. She won't read. She hates to read. She'll watch television. She learns things by watching television. And she listens to stories, but she won't read stories. She's really kind of weird. I have a brother with dyslexia as well, and he didn't learn to read until they started teaching him phonics. The reason I talk about this is because they started using phonics in the middle 50s, and they're both older than I am. And so they didn't learn to read until they were in the 3rd or 4th grade. And I started reading in the 1st grade, actually before the 1st grade. So that's what I'm talking about. They're both very intelligent people. The problem is my sister doesn't read. She can read, she just doesn't like to because she has to sound out all the words. And her handwriting is just atrocious. 8 to 10% of people are left-handed. Sinister means left-handed. Gauche means left-handed. More boys are left-handed than girls. Left-handed people are more likely to have learning disabilities. They're more likely to have migraine headaches. They're more likely to be artists. They're more likely to be musicians. They're more likely to be mathematicians. Now, I have a son that's a mathematician. My dad was a mathematician. And both of them are right-handed. I have a sister that was left-handed. And she died young. Left-handed people do tend to die younger than right-handed people. And the reason is because of frustration more than anything else. Some children with epilepsy, uncontrollable electrical activity in the brain that causes seizures, can have to have the affected hemisphere of the brain removed. In these cases, they actually develop normally with just half a brain having trouble with just select motor movements. This has to happen before the age of 12. If it doesn't happen before the age of 12, then it doesn't work. You can't do a hemispherectomy after somebody's age 12 and then the person recovered normally. But if you do it before the age of 12, usually these people have almost all their functioning is normal. There are certain things that they have problems with. There are two kinds of glands with ducts leading directly to the affected organs, such as your salivary gland or your sweat glands. Glands that are called ductless, that dump their substances, their hormones, into the bloodstream to affect another gland or organ in another part of the body. And these are the ductless glands. Endocrine glands function by what is called a negative feedback loop. The gland is signaled to release the hormone, and the on switch stays on until it is signaled to stop, kind of like a gas pump that shuts off automatically. In the old days, the pituitary gland was considered the master gland. But now we understand that the hypothalamus actually tells the pituitary when to control the rest of the endocrine glands. Most of these hormones are called releasing hormones. The hypothalamus is in the middle of the brain. The pituitary gland lies right below it and is about the size of a pea. The pituitary gland produces human growth hormone, which regulates growth of humans. Too much causes gigantism, and this guy is suffering from gigantism. Too little produces midgetism. Dwarfism is a genetic flaw that retards the growth of the long bones. So dwarves and midgets are different. Midgets look like small humans because they didn't get enough growth hormone. Dwarfs have a genetic flaw that causes their long bones not to grow. And so they look like they have big heads. A midget has a small head. He looks like a tiny human, but a dwarf looks like will have a normal sized head, but their long bones have just not grown. Dwarfism. I used to work in a children's hospital, and we would find people with that genetic flaw from time to time. It was really kind of interesting. There are indicators as to whether someone is suffering from this genetic mutation. This is Robert Ludlow. He was 8 feet 11 and a half inches tall. This is him with his brother. This is him with his mother. Here he is with two guys, and this is a guy that's trying to interview him. He had size 27 feet. Died at age 25 from an infection caused by his shoes rubbing a sore on his foot. Because of his size, his body couldn't repair it, and he died of an infection at 25. Almost as tall as a basketball hoop. He's just a foot shorter than a basketball hoop. Basketball hoop is 10 feet. Okay, why am I talking about this? Okay. Prolactin is produced by the pituitary gland. Prolactin stimulates milk production in women. Antidiuretic hormone comes from the pituitary. It regulates fluid levels in the body to keep the individual from becoming dehydrated. Oxytocin is also a pituitary hormone. It stimulates labor in pregnant women. In some animals, oxytocin brings about cuddling and caring for young. In humans, when the nipple area is stimulated in a lactating woman, it stimulates the brain to produce oxytocin, which causes the breast to eject milk. Melatonin is secreted by the pineal gland. The pineal gland is directly behind the pituitary gland. Melatonin helps regulate the sleep cycle. It may also have something to do with puberty and with aging. Thyroxin, also known as T4, is secreted by the thyroid gland. Thyroxin regulates the body's metabolism. Metabolism is the body's regulation of the utilization of oxygen and production of energy. We maintain about 100 days worth of thyroxin in our system. Hypothyroidism means low thyroxin production. This leads to lethargy, depressive symptoms, and weight gain. When this occurs in a newborn, it can cause stunted growth and permanent mental deficits. This condition is called cretinism. This is an individual who is suffering from hypothyroidism. They took his thyroid out, and this is what he looked like after his operation. Hyperthyroidism means high thyroxin production. This leads to manic behavior, insomnia, brittle hair, bulging eyes, and weight loss. The thyroid is regulated by thyroid stimulating hormone, also known as TSH. And of course, as a laboratory technician, all of this stuff, I used to measure all of this stuff. So I'm talking about hyperthyroidism, and I'm thinking, well, this is just something that we used to do. Somebody come in all, it's like they're on speed. They'd have bulging eyes, skinny as a minute. So if you have somebody in the family that acts like they're on speed all the time and they can't gain weight, they may just be hyperthyroid. What do you do for hyperthyroidism? You have to take out the thyroid gland. And that usually fixes them. Then you have to put them on TSH. Corticosteroids are hormones produced in the adrenal cortex. The adrenal glands are located on top of each kidney, and the cortex is the outer layer. Corticosteroids are secreted when the individual is in a stressful situation. They promote muscle growth and cause the liver to release stored sugar. The adrenal cortex is regulated through the release of adrenocorticotropic hormone, or ACTH. Now remember, this has to do with stress. So the ACTH in your system tells your body that it's under stress. The adrenal medulla is the inner area of the adrenal gland. Adrenaline and noradrenaline, excuse me, also known as epinephrine and norepinephrine, are secreted by the adrenal medulla. Both hormones are released to help the individual deal with stress. Research has shown that adrenaline intensifies emotions. It seems to especially work on fear and anxiety. Noradrenaline raises your blood pressure. The sexual glands of the individual, the testes for the males and the ovaries for the women, produce testosterone. The ovaries and testes are actually the same structure during early development. With males, the embryo is bathed in ever-increasing levels of testosterone to cause them to develop male physical characteristics. When males are born, they will develop primary sexual characteristics. These characteristics will develop further with puberty and will be directly involved in reproduction, the penis growth, and sperm growth. Males will develop secondary sexual characteristics that don't have anything to do with reproduction, but will help the males attract females. Thickening of the chest and shoulder muscles, male pattern hair growth, enlargement of the voice box to create the Adam's apple and deepen the voice, and they will grow to the adult height. Now, when we say male pattern hair growth, we're talking about hairier legs. We're also talking about hairier arms, hair on the chest, a different pattern of pubic hair. Synthetic testosterone, called anabolic steroids, is sometimes taken to increase muscle mass, increase resistance to stress, and overcharge the energy supply. The problem is that steroids cause liver damage, they weaken the immune system, and sometimes will cause uncontrollable rage and lead to kidney failure. And because you're taking synthetic testosterone, your testicles stop producing their own testosterone, so your testicles shrink. So you may look like this, but all your other male parts are tiny. The other thing that happens is you lose your hair. It also causes oil problems. Testosterone, males have more oil. Testosterone causes them to have oilier skin. And if you take synthetic testosterone, you tend to have lots and lots of pimples, especially on your back, as weird as that is. So you may look like this, but you've got pimples on your back, you're bald-headed, and your testicles and your penis have shrunk. As weird as that is. So this isn't real anyway. Testosterone is also found in women, but its production is much less. It assists the female sex drive. Estrogen is produced in large amounts by women in the ovaries and in small amounts by men in the testes. Along with progesterone, it regulates the menstrual cycle. It is an increase in the amount of estrogen being produced that triggers menarche, or the first menstrual period. It triggers secondary sexual characteristics in women, which includes ovulation and accumulation of fat in the breasts and the hips. Secondary sexual characteristics for women include a growth spurt and pubic hair growth. Estrogen has amazing powers of protection for women. Estrogen is high during the ovulatory years. It thins the blood, making women less likely to have heart attacks and strokes. It protects women from kidney stones. It acts as an antioxidant and so protects women from some cancers. It may protect women from Alzheimer's disease. Estrogen seems to have psychological effects on women. During peak times, women tend to be more positive when they have a high progesterone estrogen level. When estrogen is low, women are more likely to be moody, and this is the time when women complain about PMS. When estrogen levels are the highest during ovulation, women are more interested in sexual activity than when they aren't fertile. Studies have shown that women are more attracted to men who have strong masculine features during ovulation, but are more attracted to men with more feminized features at other times. Progesterone works in tandem with estrogen to regulate the menstrual cycle. Progesterone's main function is to maintain the uterus and provide for pregnancy. An increase in progesterone causes the sexual organs to mature. And that is it. So there you go. Okay. Yeah, I shouldn't have put that picture in there. I should have put another picture in there. That's really not a real picture. Nobody looks like that. But if you go to a bodybuilding competition, everybody's going to be bald-headed. If they have hair, it means that they probably didn't use steroids. But if they don't have hair, it means they probably did have use steroids. Okay, and that is it. Wait a second. There we go. Okay, so I'll see you next week. I'm not exactly sure what we're going to talk about next week, but it'll be something just as fun as this week. So, oops, that's not right.